All right, excellent. So, yeah, today, we're going to talk about tractors, strawberries, and GPS. Three of my favourite things. So I know earlier we had an agriculture-focused conversation with Marcus. Thank you very much, Marcus. With your indulgence, I might have a little chat to you at lunchtime and capture something for social media, because I know you're a... Pardon?
Bring a few strawberries on.
Strawberries at lunchtime. I'll do my best. I'll have to chat to the kitchen. Look, there was some discussion around feral pig management on the tail end of Marcus's talk, I think. I may have come across a solution in the meantime. I just want to make clear, this is not about planting strawberries, all right? This is feral pig management. I don't know if it's going to work on your yellow crazy ants. Sorry, guys. So you might need more precision munitions than that. So obviously, look, you know, here I am talking about farm doctors. You all know me as Al from Mango's Mapping, and I'm also got map gear over here that's giving away a bit of stuff. Most of you can figure this out already because you know me, but for those new faces in the audience, I just thought I'd try and demystify all of this. So there's 3 different companies in the Mango's Mapping group. All the stuff over there, you can just help yourself. It's uncontested, except for that trophy in the middle. You do have to put up a fight for that one later today. But everything else, just help yourself. Oh God, it's got a timer going. And like, I just didn't want to, like, you know, encourage gross materialism and consumption by giving everyone a bag full of stuff you don't want. So it's there on the table. If you want it, great. If you don't, we'll just stick it back in the cupboard and pull it out at some other event. But there are bottle openers and all sorts of cool things over there. So really don't be shy, help yourself. Okay, so we're going to be talking a little bit about autosteer, GPS, tractors. What is autosteer? For those of you that don't know, it is a GPS guidance system that allows tractors to navigate quite precisely through a paddock. It offers a lot of benefits for farmers in terms of reduction in time, energy, hydrocarbons powering their tractors, and chemical consumption like herbicides, pesticides, fertilisers, that sort of thing. Often contains additional hardware like a mechanical steering wheel, a steering wheel that turns itself, or hydraulic actuators in the steering systems for those tractors, so the farmer literally doesn't have to steer it until he gets to the end of the row or the end of the block. And there's also MVP approach, which is where the farmer does steer the tractor still, but he's given a little navigational cue by, and historically it's been like a bar of LEDs, you know, with green in the middle and then orange and then red on the outside, and it's like if you're over here, well, you've got to steer that way, and that sort of helps to sort of keep you on track. So why is this case study on a 4 hectare farm using autosteer, or in this case just machine guidance, interesting? Well, you see, autosteer requires RTK GPS, and often that's very interesting. And last night I was, like, you know, in the depths of despair trying to do this talk at midnight, and I thought, I know, we've got to talk about how expensive GPS is. So I googled expensive dealer, and up came this suitcase full of cash. It was seized at an airport. I don't know if it was a GPS dealer or some other kind of dealer. Maybe it's some other kind of dealer, I don't know. But it conveys the, you know, the story that, you know, RTK GPS historically has been very expensive. It's also, so the analogy of that is it's hard to apply really expensive autosteer solutions to a 4 hectare farm and get a return on your investment. Autosteer is commonly applied in broad acre cropping situations and you know, higher value crops, and it's not often applied in very small farms. So this is a 4 hectare farm, only 3 hectares in production at that point in time. And the other reason that this case study is interesting is because I got to eat ice cream while I worked, strawberry ice cream made with real strawberries, and it had the added benefit of keeping my hard drive cool on my computer, because we do this work in the wet season. I'll come back and talk about this. So why did the farmer want this autosteer on his strawberry farm? Well, they were wanting to try and get more value out of the area that they had in production, and they wanted to increase their production and take on that extra unused 4th hectare. And they wanted to engage in higher density planting, redo all the beds, and at the same time, if they could straighten up the beds and plant quite precisely against the edge of the paddock, they knew that they could get in an extra 2 rows per block. And those 2 rows equate to thousands of dollars of strawberries. The guy on the right here, Joe, He's also self-confessed OCD. He's like, it's killing me when I look out there and I see crooked rows. I just can't. I don't want to look at them. It drives me crazy. I spend the next 6 months looking at them. So this is a historical image of the rows in the strawberry farm prior to Joe's ownership of it. And you can see they're, more or less straight. There's no GPS guidance here. One of the challenges you can see is that the beds get damaged by the machinery. So they drive tractors up and down these beds to apply, fungicides or whatever they have to apply. And you can see there's a bit of damage to the plastic where the tractors sort of run up against the edge of the rows. So during the growing season, the time that you and the effort that you haven't spent getting your rows straight at the beginning of the season translates to additional, anxiety, stress, energy, trying to keep the tractor off the plastic for the rest of the year. So how did we go about trying to help Joe fix this situation? You guys know that I'm like the king of rubber bands and sticky tape, right? So it's all minimum viable product for these guys. So the first thing we did was we got an EMLD RTK GPS base station. And we surveyed that in off a local main roads permanent survey mark. So Joe had a nice coordinated base to broadcast a correction to his tractor. And these are, of course, very affordable. And if you want to know any more about that, have a chat to Map Gear later. Or Mango's Mapping or Farm Doctors. They all sell them, coincidentally. And of course, it doesn't require a suitcase of cash to buy one of these. So these, I think they're under $4,000 a pop, which is, almost an order of magnitude cheaper than some of their major competitors. So the next thing we had to do was to pimp Joe's tractor. So we installed a GNSS RTK rover on the tractor. It is minimum viable product. And we've now done it with Joe for 2 seasons. And just recently I was out there doing some other work with Joe. He's decided to get away from forming beds every year, and now he's putting in raised garden beds. So we've just helped him set out a network of 960 steel poles to mount elevated beds on. He wants to, for the greenies in the room that are concerned about the reef, he wants to create a closed loop for all of the nutrients that are going onto that crop. So rather than putting it into the soil and having part of that end up in the adjacent erosion gully and down the reef, he wants to be able to try and use fertigation and be able to capture all of the wastewater that comes out of that and reuse it. Yeah. I have some unanswered questions about all of that, and I'm sure you guys will too. Just don't expect me to answer them because I don't yet have all the answers myself. So the GPS that's on the tractor, I forgot to hit start on my 15 minutes, but you'll keep me. I'll start it now. I got 15 minutes, all right. So yeah, the GPS on the tractor, basically it uses Bluetooth to broadcast an NMEA string, basically a constant stream of real-time coordinates of that GPS unit to the tablet that's mounted on a suction ram mount on the inside of the tractor window. And we don't need to use a row of LED hard soldered lights anymore to communicate this stuff. You can just download a free app to your tablet and use that. So the first part of this, I guess, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Obviously haven't practiced this. I finished it at 1:30. So we established comms between the GPS and the tablet, right? So that's the whole using NMEA over Bluetooth. We use an app on the tablet. It's called Lefebvre, and it's a free app you can download. And for Android tablets, it allows you to put the tablet into developer mode and mock the location of the tablet. So all of the applications on the tablet, whether it's your internet browser or Google Maps or whatever, are all consuming the location services of the GPS that's on that tablet. But what you want to do is to trump the GPS on the tablet and say, no, I want everything on this tablet to consume the GPS location of my rover, of my GPS that's on the front of the tractor. And so you can do that using that Lefebvre N-Trip app. You do have to get your Android tablet into developer mode. If anyone wants to know more about how to do that, we've got a detailed process document that I'm happy to hand out, email to you, whatever. And then, it's also really cool because when you've got your rover, the one that's, on the front of the tractor or wherever you're using that, survey grade GPS, and it's in fixed mode, like it's getting a correction, it's resolved all its ambiguities and it's got its, precision, you know that blue circle of ambiguity you get, like showing, oh, this is how confident I am about my position, you know, in Google Maps, like that just disappears. It's like it's smaller than the dot on the map that shows you where you are. It's quite revealing. It's pretty cool. So then you've got the tablet inside the tractor, and you can see here that we've got it running. The tractor's now moving along its AB lines, highlighted in green there, and this is effectively your digital light bar app. And when you wander off course, it lights up those indicators, the chevrons that you can see, and basically says, you know, steer right, or steer left, that sort of thing. And that's called Field Navigator. It's actually a little bit shit, but it sort of gets the job done and it's free. So, and you know, I mean, at the end of the day, really, Joe's got about 2 or 3 days on the tools doing this each year, and he just rents the gear off us because it saves him having to buy it. But it is also quite affordable. So you get out there, the first thing you've got to do is basically draw on the map your field boundary and say this is the extent of the area on the map that I want to have AB lines, right? And it's using Google Maps in the background, which, you know, isn't necessarily as spatially accurate as you would like when you're trying to jam in as many rows as you want into a quite confined space. So we use the GPS on the tractor itself to help us understand precisely where we are relative to that production area. But what we actually do is make the production area a lot bigger than the actual beds that he's going to form up in the paddock. And we do that because there's a limitation in this technology. The limitation is that we've only got one GPS. So, you know, like professional grade machine guidance solutions for agriculture will often have like a couple of GPS beacons, or they'll have some, you know, sophisticated technology with IMUs and that sort of thing. So as soon as you turn it on, you know the relative orientation of the machine. We only know the location of the machine, and we determine the orientation by the trajectory of points. As you know, so it's computing 5 GPS points a second. So it uses the relationship between those points to determine the orientation of the machine. So when you're turning around and changing rows at the end of the paddock, you kind of need to get a little bit of a run up to come back onto the row nice and straight. Otherwise, if you're trying to do that within the row, you just, you know, you make a mess of the first 10 metres of the row. So we draw the AB lines, we extend them out beyond the rows into the headlands so that he can basically line himself up before he comes back down the row. Yeah, learnt through bitter experience. Oh. Who was it before that was talking about tears? And was it Mike? All right, okay, this is just a short video of showing you, you know, the tablet in action. There's really nothing too exciting here. I think we don't even trigger the chevrons. But you can see the green line down the side there. And this was basically in season 1 when we were just having a little bit of training. So it might be a bit of chatter in the background. But basically it draws the AB line on the map so you can see where you are. And you can't actually see it in the video, but in the background there's already AB lines in the map so you can see where you are relative to those, you know, design lines. So, you know, one of the interesting things that Joe said was that technology wasn't his strong point. And he found it a little bit difficult at first to trust the hardware. And he also found it difficult to understand the terminology. And he rang me up one day and he's like, I've spent the last 2 hours trying to get a bloody fix with my GPS. And I'm like, all right, so we're trying to troubleshoot everything. And it turned out, see, Joe's really particular. He's got OCD, so he wants to make sure everything's working. The challenge is that he was doing all of this before he'd backed the tractor out of the shed. So, you know, you've got to make sure you get the tractor out where it's got a good sky view so you can get a fix. And he said, I came a bit unstuck at these are quotes from Joe. I came a bit unstuck at the start until I trusted the equipment, that it was doing what it was supposed to be doing. I kept making errors. I would look up and think, I shouldn't be here. I should be over there. And he'd steer over there. But the reality was that he was going off track. So he's got buildings on his property that aren't square against the fence line, and he'd look at his driving and he'd go, I'm not square against the fence line because I'm not square against the building that I can see. Tries to square himself up on the building and wrecks his row. He said that was quite a challenge mentally. He said he should have just blacked out the tractor's windscreen. That would have been a better way to do it, and just trusted the gear. Tearing up quite a few $1,000s of beds hit him in the hip pocket because he forms up these beds, he plastic lines them, and because he was not trusting the gear, he did have to actually go back and do a bit of rework until he learnt to trust the gear. And because it hurt him so much financially, and he doesn't like wasting money, he finally told himself he had to trust the gear because that's what it was there for. He concludes with, "I don't have the first half of the planning as good as what I would have liked, but the second half was gun barrel straight." So there you go. Pardon? Yes, yeah, he's manually steering that. That's correct. Yep. So one of the other things is he's sick of giving all the big boys his money, and he's sworn off doing that. And we're working with a manufacturer to bring a more affordable, professional grade dual GPS beacon unit to market later this year. And we're running out of time. We should have, I think they're going to ship their demo gear to us. It's made in Switzerland. Like pre-Christmas, we'll probably have it out in the paddock in time, and we'll use Joe as our test bed. We'll stick it in his tractor and get it up and running. It's a mechanical steering solution. And once we've validated and Joe's validated, he said he's already going to buy it. And he's like, this is the testament to like building trust with your customers, like when you have a really strong relationship with someone and you put the time in and you build that trust, that you can have customers that will go along the journey with you. So I just think that's important. All right, so, I love playing around with tractors, I said that, and GPS and machine guidance. So there we go, that was one of my first efforts, pimping out I think it's a Cox ride-on at Ingham State High School. So I went and spent 2 days at Ingham State High School, teaching them about precision agriculture and drones and machine guidance and GPS as part of their Year 12 and actually Year 11 curriculum. They have some TAFE certificate stuff that they do, and part of that curriculum was delivered by farm doctors. So there you go. So with only 5 minutes and 38 seconds left of my 25-minute slot, the lessons that we learned was to bring the GPS forward, because we've only got that single GPS beacon. If we can, advance as much as possible the feedback into the tablet about our orientation, because you've got the bed former off the back of the machine and you're measuring all the physical offset off that so that, the software's compensating for the horizontal distance between the GPS beacon and the gear. But having that was fine, but having the beacon effectively behind the steering axle created problems for us. So bringing it forward and sticking it in front of the steering axle as far as we reasonably could allowed us to, make it easier for Joe to drive in straight lines with an MVP approach to this. So, the other lesson is just to trust the gear and not your own intuition. And it's funny, like I do a lot of work with clients and they go, "So how far do you reckon that is?" And I say, "I don't know, mate. Like I actually don't make a profession of measuring stuff by eye. I've got this gear that's centimetre accurate, and like I'm probably the worst person because I never bother trying to guess stuff manually." And it's amazing how often I get asked that and my response is the same. I just have to trust the gear and I ask that they will do the same. And then the other thing is that Joe, of course, can now form his beds up at night, because he used to basically line up a 20-litre empty drum at the end of the row and say, "Okay, that's what I've got to aim for." And then he'd shift it over, "Right, I'm aiming for that and I'm aiming for that." And you can only do that in daylight. So, no modern story escapes without a mention of COVID. And Joe's strawberry plant supplier had issues shipping Joe's new plants last year up to him from Victoria in the middle of the high growth rate in that first wave of Australian cases that triggered the big lockdown in Victoria. So those initial supply delays, along with the imperative to get partial shipments of the plants in the ground as soon as they arrived, because you can't just take all these strawberry seedlings and stick them in the cool room forever, extended the precision bed forming trial, which was already impacted by severe wet weather events because they plant during the wet season. Wet weather conditions during the trial meant Joe had to work the beautiful red basalt-derived soils of our tablelands while it was wetter and heavier than he would have liked. As a consequence, he swapped the gear out of a 75 horsepower tractor into he borrowed his brother's cane farming 125 horsepower tractor. But even with that, he had problems in terms of it hitting particularly wet soil and, bucking the machine around a bit. But he said one of the things that he really liked was the ease of this system of just pulling it out of one tractor and sticking it in another and not having to think about hydraulic actuators and all of that sort of stuff. So that's something that has informed our conversations with the manufacturer that we're partnering with. The only thing he had to do when he swapped tractors was to bang in a USB outlet on the new tractor to provide power to the Android tablet. He basically pulls the GPS down and recharges it overnight via USB. It's got a 16-hour battery. At the end of the trial, Joe and I caught up at my home because I like gardening, and so does Joe, and we debriefed on the project while viewing my viral veggie patch. When you don't have a lot to do, you go home and grow veggies. And Joe said he was working under such time pressure that he ended up forming some of those beds at night. They had never done that at the strawberry farm before, and Joe said he could only do that because he had the light bar solution on his tractor. All right, the suspense. What happens in the next minute and 52 seconds? Well, I'm sure you've got questions. I don't know if any of them relate to my moustache. It is November, and I'm using November to legitimise the presence of this thing on my face. It's actually triggered by my participation in a play up in Atherton that kicks off next Friday night. It's called The Diary of Anne Frank. It's on at the Silo Theatre. I don't know where you get tickets, somewhere online. Neil's in it as well. Neil, where do we get tickets? Oh, I don't know, but there's some brochures on the table over there. You don't have to fight for them. Help yourself. Get them at the door, but you can also try booking, I think. Yeah, anyway, there's a brochure over there. Neil and I are both involved in the play, so if you want to see a couple of GIS stalwarts, embarrass themselves on the stage and do all sorts of weird things. It's actually, for a heavy topic, there's actually a lot of fun in this play, and that's what the Frank family looks like in the earlier stages of the situation. Me being on the left, just trying to legitimise that moustache. Okay, now, genuine questions, 40 seconds remaining. The play kicks off next Friday night? Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Sunday might be a matinee. I don't know, the times and stuff are over there. Come and see me afterwards if you want to know more. Any other questions?
Now, with the rover higher on the tractor, didn't he laser level paddocks with the angle sort of?
Oh, no.
If it's any humps and hollow.
Yeah, no, look, it's not entirely flat. Across each hectare bed, there's approximately a metre of fall, but that's not really particularly impactful on the slope. Oh, and we're out of time. And so it's not compensating for, tilt and all of that sort of stuff. It is minimum viable product, but at the end of the day, for what Joe's trying to do, which is to pack in as many rows as he can and leave enough space for his tractor's tyres and make sure that those spaces are the appropriate distance, it was sufficient, minimum viable product. And as Joe's capability as a farmer evolves, because he used to run Better Electrical and he's been in farming now for 2.5 years, and his budget evolves, then we'll gradually shift him up the scale. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to talk.